Welcome to the Exhorter podcast, where we aim to stir up love and good works through bite-sized biblical discussion. This episode, we're going to talk about language. This came up in a Bible class the other night. After a Bible class, when a couple of young boys asked us what was wrong with certain words. And Kyle, I think that definitely met your list of something we wanted to talk about, right?
So are we talking about just like language in general? Or are we talking about euphemisms and coarse jesting? I mean, where are we going?
Well, we're going wherever you're going, Nate. You're leading this conversation.
I didn't know that was the motivation for this particular topic.
It came up about euphemisms, about, replacing curse words with other words. And what's wrong with curse words? At the end of the day, what's wrong with certain words? And
sure.
But I think it'd be a good thing to talk about.
So I know, the other day I was talking to a friend out back, and I had made a comment, and it was a euphemistic comment, and he kind of gave me a funny look. And afterwards, I felt really guilty. I was like, I shouldn't have said that because it was a euphemism. And this is something that I have struggled with for a long time. Just the euphemisms and coarse jesting. So it's like a double-edged sword for me. Yes, I think I need to talk about it, but do I really want to? Maybe not.
Nate, we're all in the same boat here. I once taught this to a junior high class, and they all walked out pale-faced and said, "We can't say anything anymore."
Well, I feel like such a hypocrite. I feel like because it's been a challenge for me. So let me ask you guys, why do we use euphemisms?
Well, I think it's an attempt to not say something worse.
Because not all euphemisms are bad. In 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 20, it says, "But now Christ is risen from the dead and has become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep." Yeah. What does Paul mean when he says fallen asleep? He says your loved ones that have died. But that's just a more polite way to say it, or a less abrasive way to say it. But falling asleep is a euphemism for dying. So not all euphemisms are bad. But John is correct that it's the idea of replacing something with a less harsh version of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was studying for this episode, I looked up the definition of euphemism because I had always just connected it with like crude joking or coarse jesting. And I realized that the definition of euphemism is just taking something harsh and replacing it with something less harsh.
You're probably more thinking like a double entendre. I think why we often gravitate towards it is because it gives us an opportunity, or so we think, to say bad words without actually saying them. But I don't think we're really fooling anyone.
Yeah.
There was this video that came out, I forget how many years ago, but it kind of stuck with me. It's this really, pasty white guy going to a predominantly black neighborhood and walking around saying, "What's up, my neighbor?" And the reactions he got until he pointed out the hidden camera, it's like, okay, he's kind of using a euphemism or replacement word for we all know what, but people are hearing the meaning. So you can replace a word with another word, but if it's clear what your meaning is, we all see through it.
Well, and that's what we kind of teach our kids sometimes. If you're saying it in your head or your heart's feeling that word, then it matters. Yeah. What comes out of your mouth is not the only thing to consider. Sometimes it's what's in your heart.
So I think that's the really important part here is what are you meaning? Because there's also the other side of it. What comes out of your mouth when you stub your toe? Your little pinky toe hits the corner of the counter and you're wearing bare feet. What comes out of your mouth?
Nate.
I mean,
John Bradford.
If we want to get overly technical with this, even just a groan, that's a euphemism. You're replacing a bad word with a different sound.
So where my mind went with euphemisms is the crude joking, because that's how I have used euphemisms the most in the past. Do you guys think that euphemisms and crude joking are related, and why?
Yeah, and that you can make that correlation where instead of saying something vulgar, you can say something that on the surface is innocuous, but with kind of the double entendre, the double meaning.
Yeah,
it's you're substituting it with something that seems innocuous.
Yeah,
but the joke is there, and you're implying the joke. So I could see a correlation between euphemisms and the idea of coarse jesting. I could see it where you're substituting something that is plainly or obviously kind of dirty with something that, well, if your mind is in the gutter, you'll get the joke.
So that's what I think about that's what she said jokes. Right?
I'm not aware of this.
No, you're not.
Joke.
No, you're not. Stop it. But that's what that is, right? Because that's what she said. Those words mean nothing. There's nothing wrong with those words.
You're just making an implication.
Yeah, you're implying something that
it's
crude.
entirely about the context of when you say it that gives it that meaning.
Right. Exactly. So in Luke chapter 6, verse 45, Jesus talks about out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So when I think about euphemisms and the relationship to crude joking, I think about, okay, well, if you're making those euphemistic jokes, then what is it that's in your heart? I think that it's an indicator of what is in your heart.
My perspective about euphemisms has always been just words to supplant actual curse words. What does darn? What does dang? What does that replace?
Oh,
like, and we say these words a lot, and they all kind of replace or OMG, right?
Because you get the Tim Hawkins list of Christian cuss words.
Yes,
shucks, rats, gadzooks, toot, holy moly, holy guacamole, son of a biscuit, shut the front door, HE double hockey sticks, bleep, great Caesar's ghost. So you get all these like,
and I'm offended by half of those. Thank you,
John Bradford.
So those are on the surface, nothing wrong with any of those words, but what are you replacing them with? And that's kind of what I get to is like when you say, well, that stinking cat.
Oh yeah.
But so it's like on the one hand, I'm like, what are you replacing in there?
Yeah.
I have a student at school and she says freaking for everything. Shut your freaking mouth. Well, who do you think you're fooling? We all know exactly what you mean and what you're trying to say.
And what you're not saying and why you're not in the principal's office right now.
Yeah,
because you didn't say it.
Yeah, exactly.
But
exactly.
it's like, but on the other hand, it's like you're not saying that word though. You're not saying the bad word.
Right.
I'm gonna have to do a parental guidance.
You said fudge.
That's where it's like, words become so commonplace that like when you say shoot, shoot, I forgot. I took the wrong turn. Does anyone really like think of that as a bad word in today's society? So when you ask it or frame this from the standpoint like stinking, it's like people say that all the time and think nothing of it. Is anyone hear you say that and think, what a potty mouth?
Well, but I don't want my kid to say, "Oh, shoot!" I don't want him to say that because I don't want to get it close to something else. But then again, he asks, "Well, what can I say?" "Oh, man." And I'm like, well, no, can't say that. No, it's like
you have to keep your thoughts to yourself.
At what point, are the words that we're using a euphemism for a euphemism for a euphemism?
Yeah, it's like Inception.
Curse word.
And that's where I start to just kind of lose interest in this topic. Like now you're afraid to say anything. Well, now you're afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
And at some point, maybe we just need to. It's good to reflect on what words I'm saying and could I do a little better? But also, you can overthink this and get in your own head. So we need a balance point. You should think about the words you say, but man, you can really take this to such a far extreme too. Because really, like if you say those words, like I said, stinking, shoot, like no one is that going to reflect poorly on Christ? No one in the world's going to look at you and say, well, that's very un-Christ-like language. Does that make it okay? I'm not necessarily making that point. I'm just saying, you also got to take into, why does the Bible not give us, these are the 5, yea, these are the 6 naughty words thou shalt never say.
Yeah.
And give us a list of naughty words because the meaning of words changes over time and from one language to another and one culture to another. And there are words we say today that are naughty, but 50 years ago, gay had an entirely different meaning.
Yeah, but now it's been rebranded multiple times because now, so it was to be happy, and then it was for a lifestyle choice, and now it is a derogatory term about a lifestyle choice you shouldn't say.
Yeah,
but it's a derogatory term used for anything.
I mean, yeah. Then we used it.
Growing up in the 90s, it was like something you didn't like. You said that's so gay.
Yeah,
it had that.
Yeah,
was it right to say it in that context? Well, if I'm going to be politically correct today, I'll say absolutely not. When you know better, you do better.
What's
So
the
the
other one I
Bible
can't say?
gives us like principles
Fast.
for what to do with our speech, like Colossians
Yes.
4 speech.
Colossians
Colossians 4:6. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. So it gives us a principle for how we should speak with grace towards others and uplifting and building others up and encouraging them.
So what I'm thinking of is Matthew chapter 5 and verse 22. And I think this fits well with what you just read, Nate, that we should speak with grace, that the idea is what we say should convey something positive or helpful or beneficial to the other person. It's not so much about what specific word you say. And this is where euphemisms really become a problem, is if you are intentionally replacing it with a vile word, with a vile meaning, doesn't matter that you change to
The
something adjacent or slightly different.
Because we know what you really mean.
Matthew 5 and verse 22 says, "But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, which means worthless one, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire." And so there's this de-escalation of crime with an escalation of penalty. If you're angry, you are in danger of judgment. If you say Raka, which is a pretty bad word, you're in danger of the council. But if you say you fool, which seems like the most innocuous of these terms, you're in danger of hellfire, the worst punishment for the least offensive crime in this verse. The idea is you can say Raka, you worthless one, but it's the same thing as saying you fool, because your intention is to speak ill of that person. Your intention is to try and tear that person down or make them feel inferior. So it's the same thing like when you're driving in your car and you say, get out of the fast lane, you idiot. Idiot's not a particularly bad word in our country. It's not like I called him, one of the big 5 naughty words.
Which are?
I count 10, but never mind.
11 if you're a sailor. But it's not like I used one of the really, really bad words. I just called him an idiot or a dummy. Sometimes I'll even use like kid words like, oh, what a dummy. He needs to stop. He needs to use his blinker.
Doofus.
Well, okay. That's, I think, more important than the specific word is, am I speaking badly of this person? Yes. Well, that's wrong. Regardless of what word I use to describe them, it's wrong because the intention behind it is to tear down. And that's, I think, the heart of this issue more than, like I said, shucks. No one's going to think anything of it. Are you trying to replace a word that is intentionally tearing someone down by saying, oh, shucks? No. Is that such a bad thing? I don't know. Could you maybe do better? I will say this. If you say something that bothers someone, you should stop saying it. If it's very close to a really bad word, you're not fooling anybody. The classic example from Christmas Story when he drops the lug nuts. Oh, fudge. Except I didn't say fudge. I said the big one. Like, yeah, you can do better than that. Or like in high school, for me, like the trend was to replace a certain word with the German equivalent of that word. It's like, you're not fooling anybody. You're just saying the same word in a different language. Like,
Right.
If the intention behind your word is hurtful or harmful to someone's character, it's wrong. And if it sounds really close to a bad word, you're probably best to just not say it.
Another subject here, though, another topic is blasphemous words, or what would deem to be taking things that are holy or spoken about in God's word or by God and making them commonplace, or,
You see them pushing this stuff even in kids' media.
Uh-huh.
Like at Disneyland, you go on Mater's carousel thing, and one of the songs he sings is "Dadgum." What is that a euphemism for? It's like he repeats that word over and over and over again in a kid's ride. Or I remember watching the movie Madagascar, and the zebra is running away from a lion, and he says, "Sugar, honey, iced tea." Well, spell out the first letter from each of those words.
Oh, Kyle. I had no idea.
Well, so, and I'm talking about things like HE double hockey sticks. We don't want to, like, sometimes a weird version to say something like hell out of context or not talking about the actual place. We'll use different words, or OMG. Something Tommy Peeler, when he was here, talked about is we can counter a lot of these kind of topics by teaching them to love God. And I think one of the parts about loving God is understanding the holiness of God and the holiness of his scriptures and the words used and why we're using those words to get them to understand. And it's so hard to get kids these days to look at things in a reverent way. When I was in high school class, I was trying to get them to understand like the idea of humility or holiness or something, or looking at something in a reverent way. And I was trying to get them to find someone in society or something that they respected. And it's so hard. It used to be that you look at the, 60, 100 years ago, maybe you look at a president or you look at some figure in the media or someone out there, and you would say that person commands respect. That person walks in today and everyone kneels, or everyone, looks at them in a certain way. It's really hard for them to do that these days because we've taken so many things in the world and we've drawn the reverence out of them. And so I think that that's one of the things, if we can focus them on loving God and understanding the Bible in a reverent way, the speech that we use on these certain things like hell, like holy. There's some songs out there where artists are calling things, they're using holy, 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 in a non-godly perspective. Right, in a non-holy way.
What about when it's an acronym for high on loving you? That's a stupid country song.
Okay. Well, that's the thing is taking these things and making them commonplace. And I think those ones bother me more because we're replacing something that should be revered, like OMG, with something. And people do it all the time when they say Jesus Christ, they say these things offhanded or for Christ's sake. They'll say these things and they have no thought or reverence or understanding of who that person is and what they did for them. And they're just using them offhandedly. And they've taken everything special about that away. And those are the words I care about
context
taking back than I am the word gay or rainbow. Right? Like those things aren't nearly as offending to me as when these words for something that I believe in.
Because in the right context, they can be really powerful. The other morning, since our fitness episode, I have been getting up in the mornings and going for walks and runs and a little bit of exercise. And so I'm up earlier than usual. And I find that sunrises are actually quite beautiful, especially from one part of my property where you can see the mountains on a clear day. Mm-hmm. And I just found myself exclaiming, "Oh my God." But I was in the midst of prayer as I was walking. My mind was on God, and it was just an expression of, this is the handiwork of God, and it's beautiful to see this part of His creation.
We sing a song, "Oh my God."
Which comes out of the book of Psalms.
I trust in Thee.
Context matters.
But that's the thing is singing that song. I think when my son was like, "Can we say that?" Like, there's things like that which and that's a shame, right? Is when we question the value, the appropriate application of some of these words, because there's so many people out there that are using them inappropriately. Well, Nate, was there any last point that you wanted to kind of button up?
Yeah, I go back to the verse in Luke chapter 6, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And I think the things that come out of our mouths are reflections of what's in our heart and should cause us to look in the mirror and look inside and say, am I being the person that Christ wants me to be, and are the words coming out of my mouth reflective of that? And then be willing to make the changes where you need to make the changes.
Yeah, and Kyle, I remember how you talk about when you were in high school, and it was the same way with me. Is when people try to get you to say a word, I think it's because the world wants you to be like them, and so when you have a different kind of speech, it's noticeable to people, and that's a value. Like that is then a superpower that you have. It's noticeable to people. So I think it's important that people are listening to what we say and how we say it, and that gives us an opportunity to be different and to show Christ through our lives. And so embrace the opportunity to not use certain words that other people are using, in place of other words, and to show reverence to holy words and things that are deserving of our reverence.
That's a good point, John. When I think back to high school and that example I've brought up in sermons, and I think earlier in episodes of this podcast, that I had some friends, some people in high school that would try to get me to say, one of the naughty words, one of the big five, and that's kind of my joking way of referring to those really bad words. And they just tried to get me to say it. We just want to hear you say it. And I got caught up in some euphemisms. I got caught up in just kind of the lingo, the way kids talked. But I do feel like I drew a hard line. There are words that I wasn't going to say, and there were words that I said that the more I thought about bothered me, and I decided I can take that word out of my vocabulary, and I still need to be doing that today. And so I think it's important that I didn't talk. In some ways, I talked like my friends because that's just kind of how we're all going to be. And that's where I said at the beginning of this episode, you can kind of drive yourself crazy thinking about, well, maybe this could be euphemism, or maybe that could be construed as a euphemism. And at some point, you're just going to overthink it, but you need to think through it at least to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And there were definite lines I drew, and we need to always be thinking about where those lines are, what words I am not going to say, and what words that maybe just come a little too close to that I probably shouldn't be saying, and just work that out of your vocabulary. Colossians 3 and verse 8 says that we need to put aside a certain number of things that include wrath, malice, blasphemy, and filthy language out of our mouth. That's something that you don't do that in one day. Okay, I've removed all filthy language out of my mouth. It's every day you need to just do some reflecting and just ask that question. Could I maybe be doing a little better? Is this maybe not the best way to say things? That should be our standards, is that I don't want filthy language coming out of my mouth. I don't want to say something, doesn't matter what words I say, but if the intent is to do harm or to tear someone down or defame them, that is wrong. I need to remove those kinds of words from my mouth. And anything that is kind of in that gray area, maybe just ask, could I be doing better?
You know, there's a very sobering verse that relates to this. Matthew 12, 36, 37. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words, you'll be justified, and by your words, you'll be condemned. And where this really hits for me is in that gray area. If there's a question about what I'm going to say, don't be careless. Be careful, because God is recording every word we say.
And that's what makes this topic so complex and nuanced, is just that the scriptures doesn't say a thing about euphemisms directly. And God doesn't tell us exactly which words to say and which words. He just says, filthy speech, remove it. He says, don't let a corrupt word proceed out of your mouth in Ephesians 4 and verse 29. But he leaves it to us to do some thinking about and determination on what fits that description of filthy speech or corrupt words.
And I think that's about the heart, like what back in Luke chapter 6, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Who are you as a person? That's what's going to come out of your mouth. And that's where we need to be making those improvements and getting better every day.
Thank you for listening to the Exhorter podcast. Thank you for your continued support and listening. If you have any other topics or any subjects you'd like for us to discuss on this podcast, go ahead and reach out to us and let us know on any social feed that you find this episode. Thanks again for your continued support, and have a great day. Watch your mouth. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode. We want to thank you for continuing. That's a euphemism. No.
What does that one mean?
We want to thank you for your continued
support.
That's the word. We want to thank you for your continued support and listening to us. We ask that you share it with a friend. Go on to Line and blog about us, and
we want to get that money. We need to monetize.
Bread. Get that bread.
Get the bag.
Yeah, get them blue strips.
Get the bag.
All right. We want to thank you for your continued support and listening to the Exhorter podcast. If you have any thoughts, any topics that you would love to hear us talk about and banter about, just go ahead and what? Why'd you laugh?
Because you're like, I'm not sure what to say.
What do I do with my hands?
I don't know what to do. Topics.
Okay, no, come let me do it.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
Well, why? Yeah, and it's just, I find it to be arbitrary at times too. Like, why is one euphemistic term fine but another isn't? Maybe they're all wrong, but
okay, this is one of those subjects.
Or maybe none of them are wrong. Maybe we just.
This is nice to say, and we've all said this is why you shouldn't use them in these things. But I mean, if you're trying to be funny, then it's okay.
Funny trumps crude. Funny trumps crude.
I think it's good to teach kids not to say certain words that only adults can use. That's a daddy word. Don't say that word.
Yeah.